Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Brescia University, to this forum. I've been asked to do the prayer, but they gave me a mic. It's always a mistake. But I do want to officially thank our candidates for being here this evening, and also our student political science organization that organized all of this, and thank you for supporting them as well as for the work that you do for this community. If you would stand, we're going to have a prayer and then the Pledge of Allegiance. Gracious God, we gather today as citizens of this great commonwealth and of this great nation. Lord, there's an incredible amount of division in our world and in our country right now. We ask you to help us to always remember the values that the founders of this nation placed before us, values that work best when we are united in love, when we are united in a spirit of compassion and justice. Lord, bless the candidates. We are grateful for their willingness to serve. Bless all of the efforts of our students here and all those who seek to make elections fair and just. Amen. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. So I'll turn this back over to the students, but I also wanted to thank Dr. Daniel Cuthey for being the faculty sponsor of our students and doing such a great job in helping to get all this together. Thank you.
All right. On behalf of the Political Science Club, we would like to thank Father Larry for that introduction, and then thank you everyone who's come out tonight, as well as our candidates who have agreed to participate. And we're going to ask that you please hold all applause until the end of our forum, but for now, please join me in welcoming our candidates to Brescia. Just to briefly go over who we have here tonight. On the end here is Mr. DJ Johnson. He is running for re-election House District 13, which includes part of Davis County and is more or less the city of Owensboro. Next to him we have Elizabeth Belcher. She is running for election in House District 14, which includes Ohio County and parts of Davis County. And we have Mr. Bob Glenn running for election in Senate District 8, which includes Davis, Hancock, and McLean counties. So before we start, just a few things to go over. Each candidate is going to have an opportunity to give an opening statement, and then we will open the forum up to questions from the audience. Each candidate is going to have 2 minutes to respond to your questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll have someone bring a mic to you. Please wait until you have a microphone to speak because we are live streaming this. So if you don't have the microphone, the people watching at home won't be able to hear you. And then at the end of the question part, we'll have a closing statement from each candidate. And so to start us off with opening statements, Mr. DJ Johnson.
Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone that came in this evening. Thank you for taking your time to come out. It's very important that we have these meetings, that we have these opportunities to discuss issues, discuss the future of our state and our city. My name is Dwayne Johnson. I've gone by DJ since college, so DJ it is. I was born and raised here in Owensboro. Graduated from Western in 1979. At the same time, I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Field Artillery in the United States Army. My first assignment was in the 1st of the 509th Airborne Battalion Combat Team, which was in Vicenza, Italy. And from there, I served or was deployed in Europe, Asia, Africa, Central America, and also the United States. I've served as a personnel officer, intelligence officer, nuclear surety officer, operations officer, executive officer, and have commanded a firing battery and a detachment assigned to support the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon. Once I finished my military career in the private sector, I've spent most of my time in sales, managing small businesses, or owning small businesses. I'm a Southern Baptist deacon and serve on the board of directors at the Senior Service Center here in Owensboro. And I originally ran 2 years ago because I was tired of Kentucky being in the bottom of every position, bottom position of every ranking that had something good about it. If it was a good category, we seemed to be 47th, 48th, 49th, or 50th. And at the same time, if there was a negative category, we seemed to lead the way. I was tired of watching that happen, and I said to myself that I needed to be willing to step forward and serve if I could. And I thought at that time that my combination of critical thinking skills I learned in the military combined with my understanding of the business world and grounded in my faith, I am a Southern Baptist deacon. I believe I'm a Christian, believe that Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. And when you combine those three things, I felt that I was ready to serve this state and this district, and that's the reason I ran 2 years ago. And I thank you for those of you who allowed me to come in. I look forward to continuing that process and ask for your vote in the coming election. Thank you.
All right, and then we'll have an opening statement from Ms. Belcher.
My name is Elizabeth Belcher, and I am running for state representative in the 14th District, which is East Davis County. That would be Philpott, Maceo, Yelvington, Whitesville, Knottsville, and those areas, and also all of Ohio County. I am a registered nurse, and I'm retired from the city of Owensboro. I was the medical officer for the police and fire department and the loss prevention manager. I retired about 10 years ago, and then I went to work for the hospital at Convenient Care in their work health program. My certification is in occupational health and safety. That's the care of workers on the job. And I have been a member of the Governor's Health and Safety Council, the Davis County Health Department as a mayor's appointee, and also the University of Louisville Environmental Committee as a Davis County representative. I'm a member of St. Joseph and Paul. I'm a graduate of Mount St. Joseph Academy, and I'm running because I have felt like that for the last 2 years it's been a nonstop attack on working families in Davis County, and I feel like that they're balancing the budget on the backs of the working people, and I want to fight for them and see that they get their taxes lowered, and that more people that can actually pay the taxes should pay them. Thank you.
Okay, I guess a man who needs no introduction. Okay. I'm Bob Glenn. I'm running for State Senate District 8, which includes all of Davis County, Hancock, and McLean counties. I'm running for several reasons. First and foremost, I'm an educator, and I've watched higher education, 2-year and 4-year college budgets be slashed again and again and again. We, on the one hand, say education pays, education matters, and then we don't fund it properly. K through 12 has had its own struggles. The second is, as a 3-term city commissioner and mayor pro tem since 2016, I have watched unfunded mandates trickle down from Frankfurt, and the most odorous one that we've had, it was odorous, but it was really onerous, is the 12% ARC requirement to turn into our, to pay for workers' pensions. I'm fine with paying with workers' pensions, but the issue is that 12% increase this year equaled about $300,000 into our budget that we had to account for, and next year it'll be about $400,000, and then the next year it'll be $500,000, and I will tell you that even though we're a relatively prosperous city, many counties and cities across the Commonwealth won't be able to sustain that. It's not a sustainable solution. The second is taking pensions away from teachers. If you go around our region, the other states that surround us, they're not getting rid of pensions. They're finding the ways to fund them properly and get them back to health. Every state around us, from Illinois to Tennessee, has a pension problem. Everybody's retiring at the same time. But the bottom line is we don't need to eliminate pensions, because if we do, what's going to happen is we're going to see the quality of public education suffer across the 120 counties of this state. And then the final thing is we need to come together to solve a host of important issues like the opioid epidemic, rebuilding our infrastructure, trying to attract new industry that pays a decent wage in this state. And we can't do it if we're yelling and screaming at each other. We need to focus on developing bipartisan solutions. And if elected your state senator, that's exactly what I hope to do. Thank you to Brescia for hosting this forum tonight, and looking forward to hearing your questions.
All right, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So if anyone has a question, just raise your hand, let us know, and we'll bring the microphone to you.
My name is Dave Boink. I represent the Public Life Foundation of Owensboro, and we've embarked on an early childhood education initiative in the last couple of years, and we're trying to do what we can as a private foundation to expand access to quality early childhood education for the children in our county. In the last 10 years, as DJ Johnson has said, you know, we often rank at the bottom or near the bottom. In the last 10 years, from 2008 to 2018, we have gone from about 21st in the nation to 41st in the percentage of our children who are enrolled in pre-K education. So the basic question is, what would you be interested in doing to change that trend, to expand opportunities for early childhood education and learning in Davis County and across Kentucky?
Is this a question for each of the candidates, or is this a specific one? All right, whoever would like to start.
First of all, I think that basically children's essential needs need to be met first, because I was a school nurse at Faust here in Owensboro. I was one of the first that Dave Atkinson put in the school. And a lot of those children don't even have their basic needs being met as far as nutrition, clothing, shelter. And so I think we need to begin there. Also, we need to quit making cuts to these programs. We've had cuts made to our after-school programs, our nutritional programs, and we cannot meet our educational needs if we continue to have cuts. So we need to fully fund public education.
Well, thank you for the question. I would agree, first and foremost, that we do have a different challenge now than we did when I was, when I was a child, I'll put it that way, back in the Stone Ages. And that is, there are basic needs that aren't being met anymore. So we do have to look at that. There are a lot of programs that are being in place for that. And we're becoming more and more aware as we go along that's a necessity before we can even start thinking about education and that sort of thing. I will say this, that as a state legislator, I am not an expert on early childhood development. I would absolutely say that. I count on people like you to come up with ideas, bring them to me. My attitude is that it's not my job to force my opinions down on the constituents of the 13th District. I feel like I'm a conduit to Frankfort for you. So, I can come up with opinions about what we should do, but you're the expert, and I would prefer to just sit down with you and hear what you've got to say, and then see if I can take that back to Frankfort and make it happen. I know that's kind of ducking the question, but you are the expert, and I want to hear from you more than I want to hear myself speak. Hope that helps answer the question for you, at least that we can talk later about it. Thank you.
Well, I think thank you for the question. learning begins at that age. It begins at preschool, and we do not have mandatory public preschool, but we have Head Start and some other programs, and those need to be expanded because it's proven that if a child starts kindergarten and they've had no exposure to the structure of a classroom and exposure to colors and things like that, rudimentary element learning cycles that we get into very early, they're behind. They're behind before they even start. So that's issue number one. I do want to echo what Elizabeth said. We have a terrible poverty program in the state of Kentucky and in our region. 48% of our children qualify for free or reduced lunch. Several systems have preempted this. We're very lucky we have great school systems in the 3 counties I hope to serve, Davis, McLean, and Hancock. But Owensboro Public Schools serves a meal, breakfast, to these kids every morning, regardless of who they are. Tamarack has started a homework night where they feed dinner to the parents and the children, and the teachers are there, take time out of their schedule basically for free to go in and work on homework that night to try and reduce the stress on families. But you look at budget cuts to family resource centers, which are a wonderful tool to help single parents and at-risk kids get a leg up in the classroom. You look at nutritional programs that have been cut. You look at the threatened cut to transportation, bus transportation. All of those issues bundle together. But with early childhood education, that's the beginning point, the starting line for a child's education. And if we fail to properly fund it and structure it at that point, we begin to fail the children of our Commonwealth right at the beginning. And that's a tragedy.
Of course, we're talking about ways to bring in more money to the state. I'm a retired teacher and also have a small business, and I'm wanting to know if the state would be willing to assess the new taxes that they put on small businesses like pet grooming and lawn mowing and even the river park and even the cigarette that makes us higher now than Indiana and Tennessee. I'm wondering if you are willing to assess that tax revenue to see if it actually will increase or has increased in the next 2 years. And if it has, then you probably should continue the taxes. But if it has not, then would you look at other ways or to bring in new tax revenue? Are you willing to do that? And do you have the wherewithal to assess the tax revenue?
Hey, let's start at the end here with Mr. Johnson and go down the row. That would be easier.
Sure, thank you. Absolutely. You know, we don't live in a vacuum. Although people like to think that when we're working in Frankfort, we're working in a vacuum, and that's not the case. If we fail to evaluate everything that we're doing, we have failed, period. So, of course, we're going to look at what works, what doesn't work. We took a new direction for taxing, for the tax system that we have in this state. Our state has had the most regressive tax system for decades. There have been at least 4 different evaluations, reports, surveys done on our tax code, and every one of them said what we need to do is go to a consumer tax instead of a productivity tax. So this is what we started. We want to do it incrementally. We didn't want to make the mistakes that other states have had when they just did it all at once. So the first step was that we lowered the income tax for every taxpayer in the state of Kentucky. If you pay income taxes, if you pay taxes on your income right now, you received an income tax reduction based on what we did with the taxes. And then the next step of that is to begin the process of having consumer taxes as opposed to the productivity tax, which is the tax on your income. The reason we're doing that is because every state in the country that's doing well, they've gone to or are in the process of going to a consumer tax. I'll point to Tennessee. Tennessee, the perfect example, Fort Campbell, Kentucky is actually Fort Campbell, Kentucky and Tennessee. And when the military soldiers come into Fort Campbell, they get to choose where they're going to live, either Kentucky or Tennessee. 80% of them live in Tennessee. 20% of them live in Kentucky. And to a person, 99.9% of them will tell you that the reason they live in Tennessee is because there's no income tax. It doesn't matter what else there is that we do to balance out that issue. They know that that income tax is critical. So that's the reason we're going in that direction. But that's a long answer for the short answer, which is yes, absolutely. We've got to evaluate and be willing to change direction if we have to. But I know that we're going in the right direction with a consumption tax instead of a productivity tax. Thank you.
According to the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, this sales tax that you were referring to won't even begin to cover the tax cuts that were given to corporations and the rich. So no, the tax will not cover and generate the revenue that they said it would. Also, the consumer tax affects the poor. It impacts the poor more than it does the middle class and also the rich, because proportionally they give more of their income to just bare necessities. The poor, if you look at our income tax in the state of Kentucky, the poor actually pay more percentage-wise in their income than the rich do. The poor pay about 9.5%. The rich pay around 6.1%. The middle class, though, gets really hit because they pay over 10% of their income into taxes. So, and regarding Tennessee, they've gone to a consumption tax, but their consumption tax, their sales tax is 10%. So it is quite high. And they are having financial issues too. So I don't feel like the consumption tax is the way to go. I feel like we need a fairer tax system where those who pay do pay, and they take the burden off the middle class.
Yes, the proposal that is being floated is straight from the Koch brothers playbook. It's right from Americans for Progress. It's wipe out and go completely to sales taxes. They tried to do it in Kansas with the Brownback plan. It was a disaster. Public education, essential services, even funding police and law enforcement all came under budget cuts because it was enacted during a time when the state of Kansas had not recovered from the recession, and they followed the Koch brothers playbook. The Koch brothers basically don't want government to exist. They don't see any benefits to government. And as a result, they don't want to fund government. And that's unfortunate because most people send their kids to a public school. Most people rely on public services like fire and police. We're not going to hire a private group to, respond to a fire or a law enforcement emergency. The other is exactly what Elizabeth has said, and I'll echo that, and that is that these taxes, the 16, 17 luxury taxes, are not luxuries at all. There's a tax on taking your pet to the vet. There's a tax on getting your car repaired. There's a tax on diapers. There's a tax on bowling. I never really thought of bowling as a luxury. It's a fun activity, but I don't really think of it as a luxury. And the issue with that is it's going to harm the poor and middle class much more so than the people in the upper tier. 95% of Kentuckians will pay more under this plan that DJ and the Republicans have proposed. The rates will go down. I agree with him there, but in the end you'll pay more. And then you add the Trump tax cuts. They basically lock in that you can only deduct $10,000 of your state income taxes. And after that, that credit is gone. So people will wind up, 95% of Kentuckians will pay far more this year in their state income taxes. And then you add in the total costs of these luxury taxes. So I don't think we should go totally away from state income tax. I think companies and businesses should pay their fair share. I think there's a way to reform our tax system so corporations don't get some of these tax breaks and they pay more in, and yet they can still be successful because they've gotten a huge federal tax break, folks, a huge, historic federal tax break. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay. Am I on? Sorry I'm late. Joy Gray, running for State Representative District 7. I had another forum in Henderson. So I finished that one, and are there any policemen in the room? Oh, one. Okay. Yeah. But anyway, I'm a retired school teacher, so the tax system is a concern. Right now, the state of Kentucky has jumped from 34th in having an unfair tax to 25th. So we're headed toward number 1. Our new tax system actually makes income inequality worse. We tax poor people more than we tax the wealthy because of the loopholes, because of the exemptions and other tax gimmicks that take away from the payment of taxes by everyone. Currently, 1% of Kentuckians makes 94% for what the poorest 20% in our state makes. For every $10 a person makes, a wealthy person makes $940. So the structure gives the wealthiest $20. So instead of paying taxes, they're earning money. So there has to be a better way. We have to have a progressive income tax. Income taxes, not consumption taxes, grows the economy. So we have to look at it being more fair, more equitable, and making sure that people give their fair share. I taught special education, and when you make adjustments, you make sure that everyone stands to have a fair chance. It doesn't mean that it's equal. It doesn't mean that you get the same thing. It means that you do what you can do. You help the person that needs the help and give them a little boost up. I believe in a hand up, not a hand out. So I think there's some changes that need to be made. I don't know if I answered the question.
Have dealt with education. You've mentioned earlier that about 50% right now of students need support because they're coming from the backgrounds that need support. So my question has to do with the poverty levels in Kentucky, which, again, coming from multiple states in this country, made us realize that they're a little higher here. What do you think causes? So it's a three-part question. What do you think causes it? Number two, what is the specific, and I'm asking you to give me a specific policy or a specific plan that you may have, even if it's not detailed plan, of how you would propose to solve that. And the third part of that is the proposition that you have, how are you going to defend it and push it through the rest of the assembly in which you will be operating? Thank you.
Right, for responses, we'll just start at the end and with. All right. Yep. Oh.
You tell me if I didn't answer. How about that? If we missed a part, you can. There were three parts. Let me just repeat what I think the question is. Don't time me. Okay, can you give me 2 seconds? I've got a three-part question. What causes poverty? What plan do you have to solve it, and how are you going to get it through the legislature? Yes. That was the question? Okay, great. Okay. Are we all good? Does that help everyone? Okay. All right. So I would say this, first of all, what causes it? In Kentucky, it's generational. It's passed down from mom to grandma to mom. And we, without getting specific, we see that. There's no doubt about it. A belief that there's no hope. If you live in eastern Kentucky where there's no decent jobs, or the only alternative is to work in a coal mine, you're probably going to be on public assistance. And of course, coal mining is not doing well, despite all the saber rattling about we're going to get coal back. Coal mines employment has actually gone down in the last year in the state of Kentucky. So what do we need? The second is we want to be a low-wage hub. That's good for corporations. It's terrible for the middle class and working families. In our area, that's a huge problem. We've got people making $10, $11 an hour, or less than that, $8 an hour. We've got people in here, I'd be real interested to know what some people at Brescia are making if they work for a private company that comes in to clean the floors or provide security. My guess is you're not getting $15 or $16 an hour, which is the wage you need to raise your family. So a lot of it is just wages are not high enough. But the third is we've got to have workforce development. And at Owensboro Community and Technical College where I work, we are a gateway to that. We are a beacon of hope. We have lots of students on both the tech and traditional college side who are changing their family tree. So that's one thing we need to continue to fund. And as the city commissioner, I did that. The innovation, expansion of the Innovation Center, we helped fund that. The city and county did to the tune of $1 million. Why? Even though it was a lot of money, we did it because we knew that the future is in high-speed manufacturing in this region and in this area, and that those are good-paying jobs, or at least they should be. The other is we need to start a state bank. Students are graduating with a huge debt when they finish college or even a 2-year degree. We need to start a bank like North Dakota has, and that is a bank that can provide low interest loans to our young people and even older people who want to go back to school to help, to provide a better income for their family. And that means that we don't have private lenders who are being, abusive to those individuals, and we allow them a chance to get that loan paid off by serving maybe a 2-year hitch in Eastern Kentucky as a teacher, a social worker, or a nurse. And I think there'd be bipartisan support for that if we can make the numbers match.
I see one of the main causes of poverty in Kentucky is it seems like that Kentuckians have been at the mercy of our lawmakers for many years, starting with Mr. McConnell on down. And we have companies that are coming into Kentucky that pay very poorly, and you have communities that will pay those companies to come in. They have occupational tax. The employees pay the occupational tax. The employer does not. Then that money from the employees goes back to the company. So basically, these employees are paying for their own jobs. So I think that we need to rethink the way we bring industry into our community. Good paying jobs come to places where there is good education, where there are good paying jobs, if you have good quality of life. And we have neither in some areas of Kentucky. And so we have to offer more to companies to bring good paying jobs to these communities. I would hope that our legislature, and I would try to, as a legislator, fully fund our education system, a fairer tax system where people are not living in poverty. Nobody should have to work 40 hours a week and live in poverty, but we see this every day. We have companies that only pay $11 and $12 an hour. When you have to be able to rent an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, you have to make at least $16.20 an hour just to be able to rent an apartment. So we need better wages and better education, and I think that that would certainly be two things that I would fight passionately for.
I can do that. The cause of poverty is something I think that has been studied for years and years and years. I know in school we did a Ruby, I can't remember what it was. It was in North Carolina where she took the children and they built housing and the kids stayed there, and it was to protect the children and to help them out. I think for an economically thriving community, of course, improved job quality and economic security. 30% of Kentucky lives below the poverty levels. We need to strengthen education for all Kentuckians because education is the great equalizer. It's the one thing that puts everybody on an even playing field. But we also need to remember that college is not always the answer. I hate to say that in my alma mater, but not every student is cut out to go to college to be a doctor or a lawyer or a nurse or a teacher. So we need to make sure, like our KEYS money goes for programs where they can learn a skilled labor, because we're always going to need plumbers and electricians and we need skilled labor. So that is another area that we need to look at so that we have those available so that our students can realize that every field is worthwhile. We don't want our children to feel like they're a failure because they didn't go to college when we have needs. I mean, I'm going to represent Union County, and in Union County they don't have a plumber and they don't have electricians. So anybody in Owensboro that wants to move there, they're constantly begging to have people come there to work. So there are many issues facing us that we can do better. And being a people person, that's who I'll represent, is the people, not the big business, and that's who we need to protect, are the people.
Thank you. I'll start with education first, because when you're talking about poverty, as has been said by every one of us, the elimination of poverty starts with a good education. And I'm thrilled with what goes on here in Owensboro. Look at the programs we have. Just most recently, the announced program between Brescia University and OCTC on the agriculture management diploma degree that's available now. In fact, I know a young lady who has been going to OCTC. She's got close to getting 2 associate's degrees, one of them in science, one of them in agriculture. She wasn't sure, well, she knew that she was going to have to go to Western next year to continue her education so she could get that diploma in management that she wanted, and then literally the same time she was making that decision, the announcement was made about the agricultural management program. She is thrilled, and I'm sure there are other people like that. The key for education is the fact that we have people who look for opportunities, look for creative ways to help our students. And as long as we're looking for ways to help that student identify what he or she wants to do with their life and then do everything we can to get them there, that's going to work. That's what, and Owensboro and Davis County are better at that than just about anybody else in the state. So I'm kind of preaching to the choir. Now, as far as just the base economy and poverty, there's a saying that says the rising tide raises all ships. And what we have done in the last 2 years is start the process of opening Kentucky to business, making it so that companies want to come here, large and small businesses, large corporations. They want to come here now. Part of that's because of the tax code we passed. A lot of it is just right to work, which there's going to be some people in here that don't like that phrase, but it brings businesses into states that have it. We have opened the doors for business and a growing economy in the state of Kentucky like has never been done before. To date, in the last 2 years, we have over $17 billion in new business growth and development pledged to this state. We've got 45,000 new jobs in the last 2 years pledged to this state, and these are not McDonald's jobs. And I love McDonald's, so if you work at McDonald's, don't take it. I'll see you in the morning. But these are jobs where the pay is going to be much higher than $11 or $15. These are quality jobs. And I think the way to increase or reduce poverty is not focus on how do we deal with the minimum wage. We need to focus on how to get everybody making more than the minimum wage and let the entry-level people make that minimum wage for a while. Bottom line is it's not about minimum wage. It's about what can we do to bring businesses in. And we've already been hearing about beating up on businesses, and businesses are horrible. Well, guess what? If there's no businesses, there's no jobs. If there's no jobs, we have 100% poverty. So let's be a little fair with the corporations and companies out there that are providing the jobs that we need to grow our economy and to grow, develop our people. Short answer, when we do that, when we have the economy growing, when we have companies wanting to come to Kentucky, a lot of the issues that we have, and we can talk about the budget issues and everything, a lot of the issues we have become easier to deal with because we actually have an economy. For the last 100 years in this state, we haven't had anybody trying in the House side build our economy. Well, now we are. In the last 2 years, we started doing that. We're going to continue to do that if you'll allow us to. Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
We're just doing 2 minutes just for response, just the question. So.
Hi, my name is Nahid Murtaza. I think it's wonderful when the state of Kentucky gets national coverage, most certainly, especially when we do good things and good things come out of our wonderful state. However, we got some coverage from Forbes back June of this year. The headline read, Kentucky Retirement Systems, a case study for politicizing pensions. And part of what I'm going to read, if you'll allow me, says, Kentucky is in the midst of a financial crisis. The Kentucky retirement system, which is responsible for the pensions of more than 365,000 current and retired state and local government employees, is facing an almost $50 billion shortfall. And at least one recent headline said that it succinctly, unfunded pensions could spell disaster for Kentucky. So my question to you, all four of you, is how are we going to get past this? This has been on the docket since last year. It has been politicized greatly. You know, you have concerned teachers. You know, they have been. It has been stated that they will be receiving their pensions. But of course, how are you going to kind of help the situation where the future teachers, the teachers who should be helping our education system, and you guys had outlined that very carefully on how you need to start, do Head Start schools and focus on preschool. How is that focus going to even be if you don't have teachers coming into the school system because there is no pension there for them? So can you please go ahead and answer that question?
I'll start it if that's okay. This year, I think for the first time, Davis County Schools, who in the past had 100 applicants for every job opening, was lucky if they had 4. So it's already happening because we have people that don't want to come to Kentucky. They're scared to because of the pension crisis. You have to remember there are 8 pensions across the state that we pay into. Some of them are better funded than others. We have let that slide in the past, the payment from the state and our legislature, because we ran into the recession in 2008. It's not an excuse, but it is an explanation. And the problem is now the state has to pay their fair share. That's why the retirement systems are not funded. The people who are working are paying their fair share. Teachers pay almost 17% of their salary into their retirement system. They pay, part of that is 3% to pay for the health care between the age of retirement and turning 65. The other is a 1.74% COLA that's prepaid, so that after you retire you can get a 1.5% COLA. So when you look at the people that are paying into it and what they're paying into it, the only missing ingredient is the state's payment into that system. So the secret is the state needs to find funding. They need to find a funding stream so that they can pay for that. What that is, we are not entirely sure. I'm open. I am not bound by any promises to any one group. I am a teacher, so I do research. I've got pages of research up here. I've got more in my bag. So I am not a stagnant learner. I am open to new ideas, new suggestions, and looking for the answers for the hard problems. I do research all the time to find answers, and that's what you're supposed to do, is to look for the answers, and you don't just take something that somebody hands you and vote on it without reading it. So I am open. I am willing to learn. And I think that is something that needs to take place, is the willingness to work together, to reach across the aisle and say, we have a problem and we have to work on it together, and to get information and input from all the stakeholders, which hasn't been done for quite some time. Thank you.
We've kind of hashed over and discussed, and if you've been paying attention, the fact that the pensions have been underfunded for many, many years. It's just a fact. It would be fun for me to get into it politically, but I won't. The bottom line is that's just a fact. What did we do? What do we do in the session? My 2 years, all my longevity of 2 years in the legislature, we did take on the pension issue head on. We fought tooth and nail amongst ourselves. We had conversations with everybody. We brought anybody and everybody in that we could. We started the discussion about the pension issue last January. During the first session, the 2017 session, we started talking about pensions. The day we finished the session, we were starting to have meetings to discuss how do we deal with the pensions. We've been working on the pension issue at least since last January. We continued working on it. We got into the session, we were still working on it. And it's a difficult thing to deal with. But what we came up with was, one, yes, we needed to provide more funding for it. So what we did was, for the first time in at least 20 years, we fully funded the pensions. And that was difficult, because when you fully fund the pension, you increase the pension payments, you're taking $1 from some other program. But it was important that we do that. And not only did we fully fund it, we put an additional $300 million into the pension fund to jumpstart the process of dealing with the decades-old problem of underfunding. So we put about $3 billion out of our $11 billion budget into the pensions this last session, so that we could get this started, get it going in the right direction. And we passed a couple of items to try to help with the structure of it as well. It's not just a management issue. It's not just a payment from the state issue. It's all kinds of different things that come together. And that's what we were talking about for literally a year and a half when we reached the decision we did. My time's up. We'll talk more about this, I'm sure. But the bottom line is, we have taken the initial steps to start funding. We just have to continue that. Thank you.
The term pension crisis, I think, has really, it's overblown the problem. This started in 2000, well, actually it started in the early 2000s, whenever actually the pension fund was funded at 125%. And so the governors started plugging holes in the budget with, instead of funding the pensions, they started funding plugging the holes in the budget. 2008, there was a recession, and also accompanied that were some terrible decisions on where to invest the pension money into. Hedge funds is what they decided to do, and it took a terrific loss in the recession of 2008. I commend the legislature this time for at least trying to make an attempt to put money into that fund. As I said, there are several different pension funds, and the CERS, which is what I'm in, we're funded at about 59%. The legislators' pension is funded at over 80%. They are taking care of their pension. They are not the teachers. And it's not just the teachers that we are facing problems with. We've got police and fire. I talked to Chief Elam the other day, and when I worked for the city and I helped with the hiring process, we would have 200 and 300 candidates for police and fire to take the testing. The last test they gave, when they took applications, there were 11 applicants and only 4 passed, and of those 4, only 2 decided to take the job because the pay was so poor and because of the pensions. Because when we have firefighters and police officers putting their lives on the line, and they know they're not going to get paid a lot, as with teachers, but they were promised a pension, a good pension. And teachers and police and fire cannot draw Social Security. I don't know if you're aware of that or not. So if we're not funding these pensions for our teachers, police and fire, especially for teachers, 78% of those teachers are female. And it is a disaster for living in poverty, because if they have a spouse, you say, well, they can draw their spouse's Social Security. They cannot draw their spouse's Social Security. So these people are being forced to live in poverty or work until they can't work anymore. And so we've got to come up with a fairer way of doing this. We've got to find funding. The state needs to start paying its share. And because we all, as retirees and as people that work for the state or for local government, we pay into that.
We're out of time for your
Thank you.
response.
I think a lot has been said about this, so let me hit areas that haven't been touched. The first is, and even if you do retire as a teacher, you can't go and add to your retirement savings by working a job that pays Social Security, because then they will begin to deduct money out of your state pension. So it's a Hobson's choice. And that's a problem too. I talked to somebody the other day who was in KTRS. She worked for us for many years, over 25 years, retired, and now has a part-time job in the school system, and she's getting Social Security taken out. She could collect it, but when she collects it, she loses a percentage of that pension. So that doesn't seem fair either. The biggest issue is that, yes, the pension system was mismanaged. Some of the investments are just ridiculous. I think on a bipartisan level, we can say whoever was running this did not do a good job. But there were two attempts by both parties to resolve this issue. In 2014, they developed a Tier 3 program for police and fire, which means new hires do not get a pension. They get a 401k style program. The second is that in earlier year, the Democrats attempted to pass a bill to fund about $3 billion by bonding it. It went to the state Senate and died, and that's what happens with the state Senate in Kentucky. Good bills go to die. So any argument that the Democrats sat around and did nothing and played the fiddle are ridiculous. But having said that, it's a problem that needs to be addressed. But it's not a unique problem to Kentucky. It is not one you have to have 100% funding. We all like to think we have to balance our checkbook. No, if you can get it up to 80, 70%, those funds that we have that are there already, those pension systems are already there, are in pretty good shape. They're not in crisis. If you've got one that's at 30, which we do, or one that's below that, that's a crisis and it needs to be addressed. But we need new revenue streams, and there are a host of ways by closing loopholes, reforming our tax system, we can do this without undue pain to the middle class. But the biggest thing is we are going to destroy what has become a jewel of a public education system in many Kentucky counties. Kira has done a great job. I'm a college teacher, and I can tell you the quality of the students in reading, writing, critical listening, and thinking has been greatly enhanced, and all that progress will be gone if we destroy public education by not providing a decent retirement system for teachers and public employees.
Hello, my name is Alex Mulholland, and I have one question. So in my household, I want to get a lot of things. I want a 100-inch TV. I want everything. And at the end of the day, I have to be able to pay for it. And I've heard you guys talk about spending money, and cutting taxes, which is spending money. And I know that talking about paying things is unfavorable when it's time for election, but what are you going to do to pay for all this stuff? And that's my big question, because you guys make a lot of great points, and I want to be behind all of those. But how do you pay for it?
First of all, that is a very good question. You know, we talk about that we want a fairer tax system where the burden isn't on the middle class. So we have to come up with a better formula for the tax system. We have to find a revenue, and we talked about, they just legalized online gaming, sports betting. So that is a source of revenue. I support medical marijuana. We have people that are having to leave the state if they have children that have seizures, and the only thing that will control it is medical marijuana, and they can't get it here in Kentucky, so they have to leave the state. We have vets with PTSD, people with Parkinson's, people with cancer that help control their pain and their nausea, and also that people that really need pain control. And it's also, they have found out through research that medical marijuana is a good vehicle to get people off of opioids. So those are a few of the ways. Also, casino gambling. You know, I'm not a big gambler, but I'll take my $20 and go across the river and pay the penny machine all afternoon. But that's $20 that could have stayed in Kentucky instead of sending it over to Indiana. When their casino was down across the river from Louisville, because of the flooding, Indiana was losing about $260,000 a day revenue into their coffer. So that is a good source of revenue. So we need to find revenue through those sources.
Well, and keep in mind, you're talking about what we should fund. Nobody said we needed a Mercedes-Benz when we just need basically a Ford tourists to get us around. The things we're talking about funding tonight are essential to the future of the Commonwealth: education, public employees, pensions for public employees and teachers. We're not talking about adding things to the list of wants. We're trying to just properly fund the needs, the level of poverty in this state. So the answers are, how do you do that? Well, let's look at the city of Owensboro. We got virtually no help in rebuilding our riverfront, except for the initial flood wall grant from Senator McConnell. And we're grateful for that. But everything else came out of a need and a desire to make this city a better place to live. And I don't think there's a person in here that can that can deny that we have attracted new business to this community, because it started out with the city of Owensboro and the county of Davis contributing money to make that riverfront project, that downtown redevelopment, happen. Then we went to tax increment finance districts, which is a wonderful mechanism of economic development and addressing public needs. We have one in downtown and one in 54, and it's working. Those areas are exploding with growth and new business and new employment. The other is public-private partnerships. We didn't just spend your tax money. We went from 80% public investment when I got in 2012 to now it's down to about 15% new public dollars. What did we do? We built a tennis facility where we partnered with the Tennis Association. We made them pay and have skin in the game. We did the same with the soccer facility that's at Legion Park, and now we've done it with the dog park. So that's how you get new programs. You get people and private entities and other public agencies to put skin in the game. And when we do that, the Commonwealth can grow. But when we talk about funding things, these are not luxuries. It's absolutely essential that our people be able to get a decent education. It's absolutely essential that we reduce the percentage of homelessness in this state and our community. It's absolutely essential that our roads be paved once less than every 30 years. And it's important we improve our infrastructure. And we're doing that with the interstate that's coming up from Bowling Green. That's a huge win for Owensboro and our whole region. And DJ deserves some credit for that, because he was around for that. Okay?
Wasn't that a Saturday Night Live skit, I think? Well, thank you, Bob. Bob hit on a lot of the things that are absolutely correct. To pay for things, first off, we have to make sure that we have a budget that's legitimate. And for, I think, the first time since I've moved back to Kentucky 16 years ago, the budget that we put forward and passed in the legislature was a legitimate budget. There have been times in the past where they would come up with a budget. We passed the budget in two ways. One is we passed the budget that we want, and then we passed the revenue bill to support the budget. And in the past, those two things, one was kind of a fairy tale compared to the reality of the other one, the actual revenues. What we did this time is our budget and our revenue bill matched. And that was difficult. That's the reason we would hear of we had to cut some budget items, and we had to eliminate some budget items, because we wanted a real budget that the people in Kentucky could look at and go, okay, that's where my money's going. But again, it goes back to the economy that we talked about earlier, and basically that rising tide raises all ships. And as we have our revenues come up, and that's happening now, the state revenues this year exceeded projections and are above what we anticipated for the first time in decades. And that's because of the programs, the bills that we passed that are bringing these industries in. As those industries come in, grow, and develop, and more come in, our revenues are going to continue to go up. So we have to be careful with how we spend the money, but at the same time, with the programs that we've put in place, those monies are going to go up. And as they go up, we'll have a little breathing room. We'll be able to deal with the pension a little bit easier. We'll be able to deal with a lot of the things that we're talking about, and then we can move on and do some of the other things we want to do. So how do we pay for it? We bring more revenue in. How do we bring more revenue in? We let the rest of the world know that they need to come here and work and have industry with us. We're going to keep doing that. Thank you.
Representing Owensboro and Union County and Henderson County is a unique conundrum. I just left the Kendall Forum over in Henderson, and Kendall themselves said that job growth in the area is stagnant, wages have fallen, job growth has declined, 40% of Kentuckians live below the poverty level. Henderson County faces many of these issues, and in Davis County, we're doing pretty good. I know Lexington thinks they're doing pretty good, but Train just announced they're leaving the state this week. And so they're losing thousands of jobs. They're losing good paying wages, and those are going to another state. So we have to make sure that the policies that we enact don't affect the businesses that are already here. And that is a fine line that you have to walk. We have to have an economically thriving Commonwealth. You have to improve job quality, and when you improve job quality, people's lives improve. They can afford to buy that 100-inch TV instead of buying the 32-inch TV. So when you have good paying jobs, you have good benefits, and your tax system is fair, you do improve the quality of life for everyone. We also need infrastructure so people can get to their jobs, can get to the doctor, can get to the services that they need to have provided. So it's a catch-22. You have to have certain things in place in order to achieve these goals. And so the job of representing the people of the state is utmost, and making sure that you do a good job doing that.
Thank you. I would like for you to explain, as you understand it, the cycle of poverty, which I think is something that continues to create a lot of issues, and will continue on. Good jobs, good paying jobs will solve a lot of problems. The cycle of poverty, I think, is something that is critical. So explain how you understand the cycle of poverty works, what socioeconomic problems come from that, and what government programs or approaches could help with that problem. And by the way, thank God there's 4 people that are willing to take on these tasks like you. Thank you.
If it's okay, I'd like to answer that first. I'm on the board of St. Benedict's Homeless Shelter and also Crossroads Homeless Shelter for Women, Emergency Shelter for Women. And I can tell you that what we see is every one of us in this room is one job loss, one hospitalization, one divorce away from poverty, from being homeless. And I think that's one of the issues of the cycle of poverty. People don't just automatically become homeless. The other second variable is addiction. Alcohol and drug addiction is a huge part of it. Even if someone is doing well financially, if they become a slave to drugs and alcohol, given the cost, given the addictive nature of the drugs, then they can destroy their lives and the lives of those with them, including their children. What we see, there's a wonderful program that Rosemary Condor is putting forth where she is looking at the effect of trauma on young people and the generational impact. Like, what is it like to live in a home where your mom or dad is abusive? What is it like for you to live in a home where food is not readily available? What is it like to live in a home where the adults are not good role models? They don't go to work, that sort of thing. So the issue is then, what do we do about that? Well, first and foremost, we've got to get treatment for those people who have an addiction issue. And St. Benedict's is wonderful in that way, and so is Crossroads and a lot of the other groups like Bulwer and Patino. So we have a good social safety net in Davis County. The second is we've got to encourage people to change their family tree. And I've been blessed as an educator at Owensboro Community College that I bump into a lot of our graduates. And some of them came from at-risk homes and single-parent families, and frankly were told by their parents at some time, you're a girl, go get married. You don't need no education. All right? And they rose above that. They said, I'm not listening to dad. I'm not listening to mom. I'm going to become my own person. And that's what we need to do, is provide infrastructure and programs. And then the third thing that I want to touch on is Medicaid. You have got to provide people with access to public health. And this governor and this Republican Party has enacted a war on the poor. And it is absolutely shameful. Trying to take away people's vision and dental care. Absolutely shameful. You're going to get people killed. This requirement of 80 hours volunteer and work. Absolutely ridiculous. A paperwork, bureaucratic nightmare. The Republicans hate bureaucracy. That's going to be a tremendous bureaucracy, and it's been shelved for the moment. The governor has one bad idea after another. And, DJ will say, well, I'm not the governor. But they stand silent and let him get away with it. They don't say that it's wrong, governor, to do this to poor people and middle-class people. And so as a consequence, they are complicit. And I don't think that's right for the people of Kentucky or the long-term
Mr. Glenn,
future
we're
of
out
this
of time for your
Commonwealth.
response.
So, thank you. Sorry, missed the time cue.
Having worked in schools and dealing with students, when you're a teacher, every child that comes into your room you have to work with, no matter who they are, no matter who their parents are, no matter what kind of home life they have. You know, and they're on the thing now, you can't touch a child. I went into my classroom one morning and a young gentleman was waiting for me. I taught senior English at Apollo, and when I said, "What's up?" and went in the room, and I sat down behind my desk, and the next thing I knew, he was sitting in my lap with his arms around my neck, sobbing on my shoulder. His birthday was the day before he turned 18, and his father put him out on the street. Said, "You're 18, take care of yourself." We spent the day working with him, trying to find him a place to live. Sorry. So right now, we have to deal with issues that are facing our children. And 4% of children in this nation live in homes that don't include a parent. But in Kentucky, we're lucky. 9% of our children live in homes that don't include a parent. So these children are being raised by a grandparent, aunt, uncle, some of that. Our legislature passed a bill that went into effect in July to help with funding for these children. But as of today, no monies have been dispersed to those people that are providing homes and food and care. And when you take someone who's living on a pension and you take in a teenager, I don't know how many of you have ever fed a teenager or tried to clothe them, that becomes an issue. So I'm out of time. But anyway, we have to look at providing treatment for addiction. We have to look at providing sources. When they tried to take the money away from the Friskies, the family resource centers in the state, and those are so important to our children and getting them what they need. So we have to look at these issues and try to help break that. Education is the great equalizer.
Well, I can speak to this from experience because I've been poor. I was raised poor, raised on a family farm. My husband was raised poor. His father was a coal miner, and also he worked at a distillery. And his mother raised 3 grandsons. And I was talking to a lady the other day, and this is a problem. We have a lot of grandparents raising grandchildren. And if you foster a grandchild, I was talking to a lady the other day who is she's got her 3 grandchildren. And she said if you foster children, you get $1,800 a month per child to foster a child. But if you're a grandparent raising your grandchildren, you get nothing. And so this is a problem, and we need to address it, that where grandparents can get some kind of financial assistance. When I have been poor, my husband and I, when we got married, we had nothing. And we had no health insurance. We had an old car that you had to climb in and out of because the door wouldn't open. We were discriminated against in housing because we were poor. We were discriminated against by the medical community because we didn't have health insurance. We were treated badly. And people in this country and in this state are demonized because they are poor. And that is a sin. We need to do a better job, especially with the children. If they don't get what they need in their formative years, they will not survive this system that we have created for them. So we have to do better. As a government, the role of government should be that we make the lives of our citizens better.
No, I'm glad you asked the question, but at the same time, I hate that you asked the question because it's just heartbreaking just to have these conversations, hear this story about the 18-year-old. It's heartbreaking. Before I forget anything else, you were absolutely right about grandparents should be able to get the same funding as anyone else. Oh, thanks. Relatives, grandparents, absolutely. If they're going to be providing the same service is not the right word, but taking care of children, they should be able to have access to the same finances. And in fact, I'm working with and co-sponsoring a bill to address that issue that I'll be pre-filing hopefully next week. It might be the week after, just because of that, because it's absolutely ludicrous that a perfect stranger can get paid $1,800 to take care of a child, but a family member who's doing the exact same thing can't. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm hoping to address that pretty soon. I'll also say this. Government has its place in fighting poverty, but the community is where poverty is going to be beat. Us, we're the ones that are going to be able to deal with the poverty issue. Government can only do so much. Government cannot do everything. It's the people. It's we the people. It's the family of our community. That's who's going to take care of poverty. We have to look around. We have to reach out. Now, we have programs in place, and I'll just mention one, Mentor Kids, where a family that has a child who doesn't have that parental role model, whether it's a mom or a dad, Mentor Kids works to match that child with an adult who's willing to provide some time to work with that child, to help with that child. And that's just one program. There's many, many more in Owensboro. We do a great job with that. But the bottom line is it's up to each and every one of us to look around, to not just be looking down as what's going on in our lives, but look around to the rest of the community and see where we can help. When we reach out and help each other in a Christian way, as I'm a Christian, then we will start to break that cycle. And I don't know any other way to do it other than that. Thank you.
My name is Alicia Gillis, sorry, and I'm going to be picking on you, Mr. Johnson, because I know how they feel, okay? But you were talking a few minutes ago about our incomes. Well, thanks to you all and the state and repealing or doing away with the prevailing wage, my household has lost $4,000 to $6,000 a year. Why would you do that? Why would you repeal, not do it? Because what I understand, the employer still gets the money, but the employee doesn't. And it isn't like, my husband is a plumber, sounding good in Union County, by the way. I'm serious, though. I'm serious. I mean, you took away prevailing wages, so you hurt my family. You took $4,000 to $6,000 a year. It isn't all the time, but that was extra income. And I'm a very strong advocate for public education. And I volunteer at probably one of the poorest schools in this city. I volunteer at Estes. And I've never seen, and I volunteered ever since I went to senior high. Well, before that. Ever since I've been in this community, I have admired our teachers. All of them.
Do you have a question, ma'am, for...
I'm sorry?
Do you have a question for any of the kids?
Yes, I do. Why would you do away with the prevailing wage? And then why would you, after you talk about public education, approve charter schools? Because they're going to take public funding out of our schools for profit. Why?
Okay, I think that was two questions. I'll take a shot at it. Do I get 4 minutes? Let's start with the charter schools first. Let's just deal with that. There are very, very few locations in the state of Kentucky where a charter school even would be something to be considered. Can I answer your question, ma'am? The process to have a charter school is intentionally and rightfully so a very difficult process to go through. There are, let me back up. The Davis County and the city of Owensboro is very, very blessed with our education system. Very blessed. The leaders, the teachers, everybody has created a tremendous system in our county and city and the private schools too. Not every place in Kentucky is like that. If you go to Louisville and look at some of the school situations there, it's difficult. And I'm being nice when I say difficult. I'm not saying charter schools are the right answer, but I think we have to open our eyes to something, because those students are being I got to use the word abused. They're not getting an education. They're getting passed through the system, given a diploma, don't know how to read or write, don't know how to do anything, and we call that a good school system. We don't have that problem here. So it's very difficult for us to put ourselves in the places of other schools. Whether it's charter schools, use the term you want. Look around here. We have the Owensboro Innovation Academy, which basically does the same thing except charter schools. The only difference is you're concerned about the private sector being involved with it. And I understand that. That's why I know there will never be a charter school in Owensboro. There will never be a charter school in here. And I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm not going to debate you. I'm going to answer your question, okay? There will never be a charter school in Owensboro because we don't need one. But there are places where there's got to be some kind of creativity. I don't care if it doesn't have to be a charter school. I'm not promoting charter schools. I'm looking for solutions for those students who don't have what we have here in Owensboro. And if it's charter schools, I will support charter schools. If it's something else, I will support that. But I'm going to support what it takes to take care of those students, period. As far as prevailing wage goes, prevailing wage, it's good for some families. It hurts a lot of other families. It hurts the system. We will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars less in the programs that we've got. We're rebuilding stadiums for Apollo and Davis County. There's school projects going on. There's road projects going on. I can understand why that hurts you, and I am sorry that that happened. But I also have a responsibility to the entire state when it comes to how is our money spent, and having a system where there are organizations out there who are willing, companies, corporations, who are willing to work on a project for a certain amount, and then we're going to artificially raise that amount and take that money out of our tax system. That's why that's why I voted with on the prevailing wage, because I have to look at the big picture, and the big picture is we're spending a lot of money on state projects, more than we needed to. And that's the decision I made. I will stand by that decision. I understand the pain it might cause you, but I also understand that it's helping our school systems and everywhere else. So I know no answer I'm going to give you is going to make you happy, but that's my answer.
Thank you. And now we'll have our final question from the audience.
I believe Mr. Glenn mentioned addiction, and I just wanted to get y'all's thoughts on the opioid addiction problem that Kentucky has and its effects on people and the criminal justice system and society as a whole, and what plans you have, if any, to combat that problem.
I'll start. The opioid epidemic is affecting everyone. We need to educate the physicians, and it seems like the more training a physician has, the less likely they are to prescribe opioids. So there needs to be some training processes going through for some of the physicians out in the state to realize this. I know West Virginia, they had 2 of the highest opioid deliverers in pharmacies within 500 feet of each other. So there are some issues with the actual dispensing of the drugs. And so drug monitoring programs maybe so that they can catch it quicker, kind of like what they do with Sudafed now, where you have to go to the counter and get it. They keep track of how many it's done. It goes into computers, and then you go into the broadband. We don't have that. So there are some issues with the issues when you're trying to deal with that. Change of public policies, and we need to realize that this addiction is a health issue, and incarceration is not always the answer. We need to have good paying jobs so people aren't actively seeking out the prescriptions so they can sell the pills and make a living. So there are quite a few facets. It's affecting our children, it's affecting our schools, it's affecting our communities, it's affecting our health care, it's affecting every aspect of our state. So we need to work with the Department of Justice. We need to look for treatment and alternatives and enhance the role of our state attorney generals and look at the Medicaid and Medicare so that some of those problems can be addressed and help the people, not the pharmaceutical companies.
Attorney General Bashir has already sued several pharmaceutical companies who were right at the core of the opioid crisis in Kentucky, West Virginia, and Ohio, and other states around us. That's a good first step because it helps us to reclaim some of that money through the court system and seek justice for Kentucky. And he's already been successful in one of those cases. So I can't emphasize enough, that's step one. The second is changing the culture of prescriptions. And how we treat pain. It's absolutely critical. An opioid is obviously potentially highly addictive. We know that. There are all kinds of alternatives to using an opioid if you're a doctor to manage pain, and that needs to become the focus. The third is the CASPR system, which is what you were talking about, needs to be adjusted so that we can track excessive purchases of opioids. But let's face it, you can do all you want. People are stealing these out of their relatives' out of their medicine cabinets. I mean, you know, they're doing everything they can and to get them, and they're not going through the traditional route. But when they come up with an addiction problem, it is absolutely critical that we focus on getting them well and healthy and off those drugs, not send them to prison. Sending them to prison creates two wrongs. They have an addiction, and now we've ruined their life, most likely, because they now have a permanent criminal record. Now, it's different if they're selling, but I'm saying if they're just using. The other issue that's absolutely essential is we need, with our young people, you know, through the DARE programs that exist in the 120 counties of the Commonwealth, to make sure that opioids are a critical part of that instructional element for young people so that they know the dangers and they're encouraged to avoid it and also try to work with their peers to avoid the potential to lean on an opioid if you have a pain management issue. It's a significant problem. My son's a firefighter. He deals with a death a week in our community. It is a crisis, and just even more so, it's a human crisis, and it's one that needs to be addressed immediately with bipartisan solutions.
Certainly, the opioid crisis is something that has impacted probably just about everybody in this community. Our family was affected by this with an overdose that became fatal. This started out during a couple of administrations ago whenever the government decided that pain was the fifth vital sign. You know, you have your blood pressure, your pulse, and they decided that nobody should hurt. And so this is how it got started, where doctors were put under a lot of pressure to prescribe pain medications to comfort their patients. And so they now realize that that was the beginning of this catastrophe that we're dealing with now. We have got to totally revamp the way we are fighting drugs. I forget how many billions of dollars we have spent on the war against drugs since Nancy Reagan put that out there years and years ago, and it's not working. Education, treating, not incarcerating people that are addicts. They are sick. This is an illness, and we need to treat it as such. And so we have to put, just throwing money at it is not going to work. We have to come up with a whole new concept of how to treat drug addiction in our communities.
You know, tonight we've discussed, debated, disagreed disagreed, maybe agreed a little bit on a lot of issues, but this is one issue that there are no party lines. I agree with everything you all have said, and I would just try to summarize it in this way. We need to punish the guilty and treat the victims. And that's what you were talking about, is that we don't need to be incarcerating people who, through whatever process, have become addicted to this demon drug. We have to work together, and without question, this is, if nothing else, we can work across party lines to deal with this issue, because if we don't, this crisis is going to sink our state. It's going to sink our country. And so I pledge with you guys right here, right now, that whatever we have to do together to make that happen, to deal with this issue, we've got to punish the guilty, we've got to treat the victims, and that's what we pledge to do across the board, period. Thank you.
Right, and that concludes our question and answer portion. We will now move into closing statements. We'd like to start maybe with Ms. Gray here and go down the line.
Mine's kind of an opening closing. I am Joy Gray. I'm running for state representative in District 7, and I do ask for your support in this race. I am a people person. I care about the people, and I'm going to leave you with a thought. The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little.
We're getting 1 minute or two. Okay. Well, I can't emphasize enough that every day I get to light the lamp of learning with my students, and I get to see their futures and the path that they're going to blaze to make our Commonwealth a better state. And if I'm elected to the State Senate on November 6th, and I need your support to do so, we're going to continue to move forward and recognize that our greatest resource in this Commonwealth is our people. We're going to do that by properly funding education. We're going to do that by making sure we retain and recruit quality teachers and public employees to work in the areas of first respondership, 9/11 dispatch, firefighters, and police officers across the state. We're going to make sure that we get rid of the rescinding of prevailing wage, because non-union and union workers both benefit in the quality of the product. That's what I'm concerned about. I don't want a school collapsing on kids. I want to make sure the building is constructed properly and with high standards. And where you get rid of prevailing wage, that's often what happens, substandard work. Unions aren't perfect, but the lack of unions in this state means that employees in this state, we are a right-to-fire state. You could walk in tomorrow if you have a job, and if you didn't like how you had combed your hair that day or the clothes you wore, they could terminate you. Workers in our states have virtually no rights whatsoever. The poor are powerless. The middle class are under attack. And I aim to stop that. I want to be a voice for working families. And how do we do that? We recognize that when you help working families, you help the state because you increase the income flow. You help businesses produce a better partnership with corporations to produce a better product and better profits. And you move the state forward. Now, I'm sure that the folks in charge now will say the economy is booming. But it isn't booming for working families. It isn't booming for the middle class. And if things are so great in Kentucky, why did Toyota and Ashland Oil move their headquarters out of Kentucky? You can never get corporations enough free stuff, and that's harmful. So we have to be careful. We need to take care of our citizens. We need to value them as our most precious resource and move the Commonwealth forward. And with your support on November 6th, I hope to do just that. Thank you. And thank you to Brescia for hosting this event.
If Kentucky put an ad in the paper and they were advertising for companies, they would say, come to Kentucky if you don't want to pay a fair wage. Come to Kentucky if you don't want to have to pay if your worker gets injured. Come to Kentucky because if you have to lay somebody off, we've cut the unemployment benefits in half. Come to Kentucky if you want to your workers to work for less. I want to change that. They talk about the jobs that are coming to Kentucky. They're not good paying jobs, and if they are, 46% of them are going to the Golden Triangle. Only 3% are coming to Western Kentucky. We have got to change it. I want to represent Ohio County, where their population is dwindling, where their wages have dropped $2,000 a year per family, the average wage in the last 2 years. I want to raise the wages for workers, and whenever that happens, then these quality of life issues will resolve themselves. Thank you.
First off, thank you to everyone from Brescia for having us tonight. I think it's been a great debate, great discussions, good topics, great questions. So thank you for all of you that came as well. As I said when we started this evening, 2 years ago, the reason I ran for election to the 13th District State Representative seat was I was tired of seeing Kentucky at the top of every bad list and at the bottom of every good list. And in the 2 years since I've been elected, I've been working hard to change that. I have to look at notes, I apologize, but In my first 2 years, I've passed legislation that's restored individual property rights to people, reduced government bureaucracy for plumbers and HVAC technicians through legislation, promoted Bible literacy in high schools, not evangelism, but Bible literacy to know what our history of our country is about. I promoted opportunities for disabled military veterans, small business owners. And I promoted, and we didn't even talk about this tonight, industrial hemp is a cash crop for our state. Not only is industrial hemp an awesome opportunity for a cash crop, it's also a great opportunity for dealing with some of the medical issues that we've been talking about tonight, PTSD and other things. So I'm promoting that. I think that's something for the future of our state. I've co-sponsored or voted for numerous landmark pro-life bills, economic development bills, child welfare bills, many other things. But the bottom line is this is how I've tried to do my job as your state representative. If you have something you want to talk to me about, if you have an issue that you think needs to be addressed, I work for you. I try my best to do that. I've put my cell phone number all over the place. Before you leave tonight, if you want my cell phone number, come up and I'll give it to you. I work for you. If you've got an issue, please come talk to me. I want to be available to you, and I will continue to do that. Just for the record, I'm endorsed by the Kentucky Right to Life, the NRA. I'm endorsed by the local Fraternal Order of Police, County Judge Executive Al Mattingly, Mayor Tom Watson, and many others. What that I hope says to you is that I have been trying to do my very best for you, and people have recognized that. In my first 2 years, I think I've proven what a hardworking and dedicated state representative should be, and that's a state representative for the people. Again, if you need me, please come to me. I'll do my best to help you. I may not be able to do something. I may not be able to help everybody. We may not agree on everything, but I am your representative, and I will do my best for you. And with that being the case, I am asking for your vote for 13th District on November 6th. Thank you for this evening.
Hello, my name is Daniel Cuthey. I'm a faculty member here at Brescia University in Political Science, and I'd like to thank all of the candidates for showing up, spending these countless hours working for the opportunity to serve the public. Thank you all to the audience members for your wonderful show of civic spirit and participation and coming out here and asking your questions about which you're passionate, and I certainly do appreciate. But thank you especially to the students that organized this, the Political Science Club, and especially this was a student-run and initiated effort from the start, especially Gina James and Logan Hart and other students such as Devin Roche have helped out as well. But they initiated it, they organized it, and as the candidates can attest, badgered them to make sure they showed up here, showed them, shared the rules with them, set them, and I was just here to support them. So thank you very much to them. I'm very lucky to have such wonderful students, and all of us here at Brescia are. So thank you all again, but whether you're here attending, watching the live stream, or watching the recording later, we will post the recording on our Facebook page, link to it, so that anybody that wants to watch this again and just bask in our wonderful candidates, our wonderful students, or our wonderful space, please feel free to do so and share that with anybody who might be interested. Thank you all, and I hope you have a good night.